Betrayal does not arrive like thunder. It enters as quiet as dust, settling on surfaces you stopped noticing years ago. My name is Nora Bennett. I am 36. I design museum exhibits for a living, arranging fragments until a story appears. At home, I have always done the same thing with my family. I placed my mother's silences beside my brother's charm, my father's absence beside the word accident, and told myself the display made sense. It never did. It only looked tidy from a distance. I returned to the Bennett house on a rain-soft Saturday because my mother said the roof was leaking over the study. Helen does not ask. She ensures. Her voice on the phone had the efficiency of a calendar reminder. Bring towels. Bring common sense. Do not bring questions. The house smelled the way houses smell when they insist on being historical. Furniture polish, sun-warmed books, the faint memory of citrus because my mother believes lemons can disinfect bloodlines. The leak had left a bruise on the ceiling above my father's old desk. I dragged a bucket underneath and listened to the slow, patient tap of water that had found its path through layers of paint and time. While I waited for the roofer, I opened the bottom drawer of the desk to find a cloth I remembered. Instead, my fingers touched a file box with a key already in the lock. For a moment I watched my hand, as if it belonged to someone more impulsive, and then I turned the key. Inside lay a stack of envelopes, the kind you buy in bulk when you expect to mail a future to someone. Each was addressed in my father's handwriting. Michael Bennett. The name that had carried an obituary, a eulogy, a headstone. The first envelope was addressed to me. No stamp. No postmark. I slid the letter out like a blade. Nora, if you have found this, your mother has failed to keep the story intact. I am not good at truth. I have practiced it, then failed it, like piano lessons I never wanted. What you know about my death is not wrong. It is incomplete. I read the lines twice, then again, until the letters steadied. The roof dripped. The bucket received. Somewhere in the house, the grandfather clock made its practical argument for forward motion. I turned to the next envelope. Helen. I did not open it. The third read James. I held it up to the light and saw the shadow of numbers written across the page. Bank numbers. The fourth had no name at all, only a locker code written where an address should be. I put everything back into the box, then took the box anyway. I told myself it was to keep the papers from the leak. I told myself many things. My hands did not believe me. In the kitchen, my mother was already arranging a tea service even though it was not a time of day, it was a reflex. She wore navy, the color she uses when she wants to look like the president of an unlisted country. Roof? She asked. Bruised, I said. It will need more than towels. Everything needs more than towels, she replied, setting out lemon slices as if they were warning triangles. Her eyes moved to the file box. What is that? Old papers, I said. Dad's. Your father's study is a storage room, she said. Do not turn it into a shrine. I waited for her to tell me to put the box back. She did not. Helen has a talent for not asking questions in a way that makes you answer them anyway. I will sort them, I said. Quietly. She nodded, but her gaze landed on my hands. For a second something fragile crossed her face, then hardened into the usual surface. James will come by for dinner, she said. Pretend you did not know. When my mother speaks like that, she is not inviting you to conspiracies. She is assigning roles. I have played mine for years. The dutiful daughter. The one who keeps the room temperature controlled. The one who sands the jagged edges of truth until guests can lean on it without bleeding. James arrived at 7, absolutely himself. My brother has the talent of being the most charming person in any room and the least reliable person in any plan. He kissed our mother's cheek and squeezed my shoulder with the pressure of a password. How is the museum? He asked, taking a seat before anyone offered one. Open, I said. He laughed as if I had been wittier. And the roof? Leaking, I said. Like everyone else's version of our family. He did not flinch. He never does when discomfort enters. He redirects it the way you redirect traffic around a hole you do not intend to fill. He poured wine, complimented the roast, asked if I still collected postcards from exhibitions. He did not ask about the file box sitting in the hall closet. I waited for him to glance at the door. He did not. That is the problem with James. He can ignore anything he cannot spend. After dinner, the rain slowed to a stubborn mist. My mother stacked plates with the precision of a surgeon sparing a reputation. I carried the box to my old room and locked the door, an act that felt theatrical in this house where every door sounds gossip. I opened the envelope addressed to me again. The second paragraph waited. I was never meant to be a businessman. I learned the posture and the words, but not the bones. Your mother built the bones. I hung my coat on them and pretended I was a house. When the house began to lean, I borrowed against it. Then I borrowed against the future. Then your mother found the books. We made a bargain that was not a marriage. I would disappear long enough for her to repair what could be repaired. She would tell you what she could live with. I wanted to be brave enough to stay. I wanted to be kind enough to go. I chose the wrong version of both. A line on the bottom in smaller script. Nora, I need you to find a woman named Clara Whitmore. She lives 2 doors down. She knows what I could not tell. My hands went still. Clara Whitmore. The neighbor who brought over casseroles like bandages when the obituary was printed. The woman who waved from her porch and called me Star. The woman my mother always greeted with polite brevity, as if friendliness were contagion. I pulled out my phone and typed Clara into my contacts. I had never saved her number. People who live across the street do not need numbers, they need waving. I put on my coat and took the box with me. The hallway smelled like rain and family. I walked past my mother in the study. She was standing at the window where the ceiling dripped, her hands folded as if in prayer, though Helen does not pray. She negotiates. Out, I said. For milk, she replied, the code for do not be gone long. Clara's porch light threw a warm circle onto the steps. I knocked twice. She opened the door with the speed of someone already at the threshold. She had not aged the way time usually insists. Her hair was white now, but her eyes were unbroken glass. I was expecting you 10 years ago, she said. I held up the box. I am late. She smiled, the kind that chooses gentleness over accuracy. Come in. Her living room looked like living had actually happened in it. Books with spines broken by love, a half-finished puzzle on a side table, a plant that had survived forgetfulness and become a tree. She poured tea into mismatched cups and waited for me to say something that would gift her the next sentence. My father asked me to find you, I said. In a letter he never mailed. She closed her eyes for a second. Michael was always best at almost. What do you know? I asked. That your mother is better at endings than beginnings, she said. And that your brother is allergic to consequence. Tell me about him, I said, meaning my father. She nodded toward the box. Show me what you brought. I laid the envelopes out on her coffee table like artifacts. She lifted the one addressed to Helen but did not open it. She touched the unmarked one with the locker code and smiled in a way that was not happiness. He wanted to leave you a map, she said. Your mother wanted to leave you a museum plaque. James wanted a key ring. You need the map. Where does it go? I asked. To a storage locker on the edge of town, she said. Your father rented it the week before he died in the newspaper. He stored what he called the remainder. I told him remainders are still parts of a sum. He said he was learning math too late. Why did he ask you to keep this? I asked. Because I loved him once, she said. In a way that did not require marriage or inheritance to feel true. And because I was not afraid of your mother. The room tilted, not physically, but morally. Did she know? She knew everything worth knowing, Clara said. She chose the version that saved the Bennett name. She paid the debt she could, buried the ones she could not, and told the town a clean story. Clean stories stain slower. I thought of the roof leak traveling patiently through rafters, finding light. Why tell me now? Because you finally asked, she said. And because I am tired of being the only person on this street who remembers your father as a person rather than a warning. I folded the letters back into the box. Will you come with me to the locker? I will drive, she said. You shake when you hold keys that open old doors. We stepped out onto the porch. Across the street, my mother's silhouette stood at the study window, still as a portrait. The rain had stopped, but the air held onto it, as if weather, too, could refuse to move on. Clara locked her door and looked at me as if measuring whether I would run. "You can still walk back," she said. "It is the last moment you will have that option." "I am tired of curated exhibits," I said. "I want the storage room, dust and all." She nodded. "Then let us go collect the remainder." Clara's car smelled faintly of lavender and old paper, the kind of scent that clings to someone who keeps their promises longer than most. I sat in the passenger seat with the file box balanced on my lap, as if setting it down might invite gravity to take the secrets out of my hands. The storage facility was the kind of place people drive past 1,000 times without seeing. Rows of metal doors, all painted the same weary green, stretched into the night. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering as though even electricity had grown tired of guarding these forgotten lives. Clara parked by Unit 213. "This is the one," she said. The key felt heavy in my hand, more like a verdict than metal. When I slid it into the lock, my fingers trembled. The door creaked upward to reveal boxes stacked like soldiers, a trunk scarred by travel, and a single chair positioned in the middle of the space as though someone once sat there, waiting. Dust floated in the flashlight beam. I knelt, tugging open the trunk. Inside lay a collection of ledgers, bound in cracked leather. The top one bore my father's initials. Numbers crawled across the pages, debts and credits like veins and scars. And there's scribbled in the margins names. Not just his clients. Neighbors. Friends. The town itself. Clara touched my shoulder. He was laundering, yes. But he was also repaying. Quietly. To some. Not to all. I turned the page and froze. The Bennett name appeared more than once. James. His debts. His businesses. His loans. The ledger showed that my father had covered for my brother again and again, right up until the week of his so-called death. Anger and disbelief burned together in my throat. So James knew. He must have. Clara shook her head. Not necessarily. Your father hid his shame like art behind glass. But James has lived off invisible favors for years. He never asked where they came from. That's its own kind of knowledge. I pulled out a smaller box buried beneath the ledgers. Inside were photographs. One showed my father and Clara on her porch, long before my memory could hold it. Another was of my mother, younger, her smile tense as if braced against something unsaid. The third was of me, maybe 6 years old, holding James's hand at the county fair. My father stood behind us, gaze turned away from the camera, as if already planning his escape. What was he trying to leave me? I whispered. Clara bent, picked up one envelope left in the trunk. It bore only my name. Inside was a single sheet. Nora, if you are reading this, then the lie is no longer working. I wanted you to grow without my shadow, but shadows always stretch. Do not forgive me too quickly. And do not trust the story James tells when the truth begins to surface. My hands shook. His warning me. About my own brother. The air felt colder inside the unit, as if the walls themselves had heard. When I turned, Clara was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Secrets like these don't stay folded. Your mother knows you've opened the box. And James he will find out soon enough. I closed the trunk, my chest tight with dread. Then what do I do? Clara's gaze sharpened. You decide whether you are a curator like your mother, or a truth-teller like your father wished he could be. I didn't answer. I couldn't. But I knew one thing as we locked the unit and stepped back into the night. The Bennett family story wasn't just fractured. It was rigged like a trap. And I had just set it off. The Ward house felt different when I returned that night, though nothing on the surface had changed. The porch light still glowed like a beacon, the curtains in the parlor were still drawn just so, and Margaret, my mother, was waiting in her usual chair as if she had never moved. But the air was heavy with the weight of what I carried back from Clara's storage unit. The envelope with my father's handwriting burned against my ribs from inside my coat pocket. James was already there, sprawled on the sofa with a drink in his hand, casual in a way that only people with debts they never intend to pay can manage. He glanced at me, then at Margaret. "She knows something," he said flatly. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "Of course she does. Curiosity is Nora's curse." I ignored them both long enough to hang my coat and steady my breath. Then I walked into the room and set the envelope on the table between us. "He's alive," I said quietly. "Or at least he was when he wrote this." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then James gave a short, sharp laugh. "You think he cared enough to write to you? He left us, Nora. If he wanted to come back, he would have." Margaret's gaze cut across the space, sharp enough to slice. "Where did you get this? Does it matter? What matters is that you lied to us. Both of you." My voice shook, but I didn't stop. "You staged a death. You buried an empty casket. You let me mourn a ghost while he was still out there making mistakes you didn't want the world to see." Margaret stood, her posture regal even in accusation. "I protected you. I gave you a name unsullied by his sins." "You gave me a lie," I whispered. "And James," I turned on him, my throat tightening. "How many times did you use his silence to cover your own failures? His ledgers are filled with your debts." James's jaw clenched, but his eyes gleamed with something almost triumphant. "So what? You think you're the first to figure it out? I've known for years." The room tilted. "You knew?" I asked, my voice breaking. "And you let me think we were both victims of the same story?" He shrugged. "Careless. Better you played the part. You made a good grieving daughter. That sympathy bought us time." Margaret's voice snapped like a whip. "Enough. This family survives on what we choose to show, not what we hide. Nora, you will not destroy everything I built because you've decided honesty is fashionable." I looked at her, this woman who had held our world together with cold hands, and felt something in me harden. "You didn't build a family, Mother. You built a facade. And I'm done living in it." Her expression flickered, but only for a second. James drained his glass and set it down with deliberate care. "If you expose any of this," he said softly, "you'll regret it. Not just because of what it does to her, but because of what it does to you. You think you're ready to carry the truth, but you're not. You'll be crushed." I picked up the envelope again and held it to my chest. "Then let it crush me. At least it will be real." I left them standing there in silence, my mother rigid with fury, my brother smirking as if he had already won. But as I stepped outside into the night, I realized neither of them truly understood me anymore. I wasn't the grieving daughter or the obedient sister. I was something else entirely. And the next move was mine. The following morning, I woke with the letter still clutched in my hand, the ink smudged where my fingers had pressed too tightly. I read it again, even though I already knew the words by heart. My father's handwriting, careful but hurried, told me what Margaret and James never had. He hadn't vanished into death, he had been forced out. Someone had threatened him, cornered him with debts that weren't his alone. He had left to protect us. Or so he claimed. But there was one line that hollowed me out: "If you want the truth, look where the ward name is most fragile." I didn't know what that meant until later that afternoon, when Evelyn Cross showed up at my door. She carried a tin of shortbread cookies like she always did, but her eyes were sharper than kindness. She'd lived next door for as long as I could remember, our honorary aunt, always present with advice and casseroles. Now she lowered her voice as soon as I invited her in. "You found something, didn't you?" she asked. I stared at her, startled. "How could you possibly?" "Because I've been waiting 20 years for Margaret's secrets to bleed through," she interrupted. "And now they have." I showed her the letter. She read it silently, her lips pressed thin, before sliding it back to me. "He wasn't lying, Nora. Your father didn't run away because he wanted to. He was pushed by men who knew James's debts were a crack in the Ward legacy. They demanded repayment in blood or money. Margaret made her choice." The world tilted again, and I grabbed the edge of the counter. "She told us he was a thief." "He was, in his way. But not of the kind she wanted you to believe. He took the fall for debts James created. Margaret buried him in absence rather than face the shame of truth." My throat tightened. "You knew this? All these years?" Evelyn's expression softened. I tried to tell you when you were younger. Margaret threatened to cut me out of your lives if I did. And I couldn't lose you too. I sat heavily, the letter trembling in my hand. Then where is he now? Evelyn hesitated, then reached into her coat and pulled out a small brass key. She set it on the table between us. He left this with me. Said one day, when you were strong enough, you'd come looking. It opens a deposit box at the First National downtown. The metal glinted in the weak light. My heart pounded. By evening, I was back at the ward house. Margaret sat in her chair again, immovable as stone, James lounging nearby with a smirk that had begun to feel like a mask he could no longer remove. I placed the key on the coffee table. You kept him alive on paper, I said. You buried him with lies. But this is his voice, his choice to be heard again. And I'm going to find out what's inside. Margaret's hand twitched, the first sign of weakness I had seen in her in years. If you open that box, she said, her voice low, you'll lose everything I've protected for you. I leaned forward, fire steady in my chest. I don't want your protection anymore. I want the truth. James laughed, sharp and cruel. Careful, Nora. You open that box, you won't just destroy her legacy, you'll destroy yourself. I stood, sliding the key back into my pocket. Then let it all burn. For the first time, I saw fear in both their eyes. Not of losing me, but of losing control. And in that moment, I realized my family had taught me how to keep secrets. Now I was ready to teach them what happened when secrets finally came to light. The bank clerk barely looked at me when I slid the brass key across the counter the next morning. He disappeared behind a door and returned with a small metal box, its surface scratched and dull with age. My hands trembled as he set it in the private viewing room. I waited until the door closed before lifting the lid. Inside, neatly stacked envelopes bore my father's handwriting. Each was addressed to me, some older than I could remember, dated every year since his disappearance. Beneath them lay ledgers, careful records of payments he had made to cover debts that weren't his, signed with his name but always annotated, for James. And at the bottom, a single photograph, yellowed with time. My father, Margaret, and Evelyn stood together in front of the ward house. My father's smile was hollow. The letters told the rest. He had left because James had gambled not only away his own fortune but funds tied to the family business. Dangerous men had demanded repayment, and Margaret, terrified of scandal and ruin, had convinced him to take the blame. They staged his death, with Evelyn as the silent witness. He sent money back when he could, funneling it through Teresa Alvarez, the old housekeeper, whose name kept surfacing like a ghost. He had dreamed of returning one day, but Margaret never let him. Every letter ended the same: I hope you grow into a woman who chooses truth over loyalty. If you do, then maybe I didn't disappear in vain. I cried, for him, for myself, for the years spent grieving someone who had been alive all along. When I returned to the ward house, I found Margaret waiting. She didn't flinch when I placed the letters on the table, one by one. So, she said, her voice quiet. You know everything now. Not everything, I replied. I don't know if you ever loved him. Or me. Or if you only ever loved control. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. Love is fragile, Nora. I chose survival. And in doing so, you killed him anyway. James stormed into the room, his temper frayed. This is ridiculous. You're digging up bones that should stay buried. You think anyone will believe you. The world loves Margaret Ward, the perfect matriarch, not your sob story about a father who couldn't face his debts. I turned on him, rage steady now, cold and clear. I don't need the world to believe me. I just need you to know I won't carry your sins anymore. He sneered, but there was fear beneath it. Margaret finally spoke, her voice trembling. If you expose us, Nora, everything ends. The house, the business, the name, it all crumbles. Then let it crumble, I said. It was built on lies. I walked out with the letters in my bag, Evelyn waiting for me on the porch. For the first time, I felt the weight lift, not because the truth was easy, but because it was mine. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the city humming outside my window, and reread the last line of my father's final letter. If you are holding this, Nora, then you are stronger than all of us. For once, I believed him. The Ward legacy was ashes now. But from ashes, you can choose what rises.